Hey guys, what's up? So, welcome to my part three of the Native American Legends of Christ series. Um, from me reading in the book He Walked the Americas by L. Taylor Hansen. So today I'm reading from the chapter called The God Wakia. And this is from Polynesia. So it says, once in the days long vanished, with three great ships which had sailed from the sunset lands, came white-robed Wakia, the fair god, who healed the injured, raised the dead, and walked on water. He came to an outlying island of the Tahitian group, where two tribes were fighting bitterly. Now, however, the Polynesians are all one people, anciently calling themselves Maori, from New Zealand to Easter Island off the South American coastline. They were the Vikings of the sunrise, rowing their long boats over the trackless ocean, guiding themselves by the stars of the heavens, and speaking one language from Hawaii southward. They used the same plants, kept the same animals, and sang the same songs of the ancients. One of these was of the god Wakia. To an island where men were fighting for the possession of the good land came three ships with giant sails like enormous birds, with wings uplifted, glowing goldenly in the dawn light. Suddenly frozen to immobility were the warriors as the ships moved around a jutting headland. What manner of monsters are these with the great wings? Perhaps they have come to devour the people. Forgotten was the heat of the battle. Friend and foe stood facing seaward, weapons clutched in paralyzed fingers, staring in wide-eyed wonder. The ship's oarsmen, whose paddles looked like 100 centipede legs touching the water, rested now from their task of moving the giant monsters forward. Then the islanders saw something white moving toward them. Apparently it had come from the great birds, and it glided easily over the water with the rhythmical ease of a man walking. As the spot of white came closer, they saw in amazement that this was a fair god, man-like in form, but unlike their people. Soon they could see him clearly, the gold of the dawn light shining behind and around him, making a halo of his long curling hair and beard. They saw the foam-like swish of his garments. As he came up on the wet sand, the warriors stared in fright at his garments. They were dry. Now they knew that a god stood among them, for none but gods can walk on water. From his garments, so foam white, they looked to his pale face and then into his eyes. They were strange eyes, gray-green as the depths of the water, and like it, ever changing. Now those eyes flashed with anger as he stared about him and looked upon the injured. A god had come from the sea to walk among them, and his first look was that of anger. The warriors fell down as one man and began an old chant anciently employed to a god for forgiveness. When they dared again to raise up their own eyes, they saw him going among the injured and dying who arose from their pain to find themselves well of body as soon as his hand or his garments had touched them. Thus, on this never to be forgotten day, came the beloved Wakia to live for a while among the people. When the villagers arrived with presents, creeping on their knees toward him, he signaled the ships. Small boats now left the great birds and brought other strangers. These men, though something like him in features and like him bearded, were different in two ways from the god Wakia. Most plain to see was that their garments were not white, but colored. But there was something beside this material difference. It was the way these friends looked upon their leader. In their eyes one could see reverence. In their strange speech one could feel their great love. Friend and foe among the Polynesians now set about to entertain the strangers, putting forth their choicest dishes, making welcome with song and dances. They invited the strangers to partake of the great feast. They had planned an entire night of merry-making, but alas, as the sun began to paint the western sky with the colors of the orchids hanging in profusion in the forest, they could see that the strangers were preparing to leave them. The sadness they had felt at this discovery was suddenly reversed when they saw the strangers bidding tearful farewell to the god Wakia. Scarcely had the people dreamed of this good fortune, for now it was becoming very obvious that the god Wakia was planning no journey, but would remain among them. Respectfully, at a short distance, stood the people, while Wakia comforted the tearful strangers. They saw him point to the direction of the sunrise, and wondered among themselves what he might be saying in his strange language. Then, after many further embraces, they watched the strangers enter the small boats and row back to the great bird ships. As Wakia stood there on the sand watching sadly, the chief stepped up quietly and pointed to a high point which looked over the jutting headland around which the ships were now passing. Wakia nodded quickly, followed the chief and some of the people to the sun-painted high point. There, there they together watched the three ships move into the sunset, fading at last into the sea of beauty. Only then did they return to the village, and the great ships were never more seen by the tribesmen. Very quickly Wakia learned Polynesian. The people were amazed at the speed of his learning. As the long days passed, he began to teach the tribesmen. He told them of the one God who ruled the heavens, who spoke through the volcanoes, and who breathed on the ocean. To him, war was not of his making, for his law was love one another. For Wakia, they gave up war and the sacrifice of children, which had kept down their populations, so that they would not overeat their islands. Then the men carried him with them, taking Wakia from island to island, so each one would meet the strange fair god, whose hands were miracles of healing. Many then were the songs of Wakia, and many the legends, which down the long vistas of time have been forgotten, yet his name has never been forgotten. Wakia had one strange custom. Every morning before dawn he would rise and pray toward the dawn star on some high point facing seaward. When they asked him why he did this, he said that even so would his friends be praying in that far-off land across the ocean. The people remembered, thought of that day when he had come to them, of his friends who had wept when they were leaving, and how he had pointed for them toward the sunrise heavens. Finally, the fair god knew well all the islands, and there was not one where he had not landed, feasted with, and taught the people. It was then that he looked more often towards the direction of the dawning, and asked questions about the lands of the dawn star. The people were not entirely unacquainted with the continent lying eastward. Did they not have the yam to eat and call it by its ancient South American name? Yet they were loath to lose the healer, the strange god who answered to the name they had given him, Wakia, the fair god of the ocean. As long as they could, they tried to dissuade his growing wish to travel eastward, yet they loved him too much to deny his desire, and so preparations were made for the long journey to be made in the boats of the migrations. Through their tears, the people watched him take his seat in the long boat, while one child called out in a voice broken, by sobbing, "Are we never to see you again? Are we never to see you, Wakia?" In his melodious voice, the fair god made answer, "One day you will see me returning, even as I came, through the light of the dawning, if you remember to keep my commandments and always love one another." The canoes of many rowers carried much food and water. Through wind and storm they stayed together, keeping each other in sight in the daytime and at night by alternate chanting. Thus from the islands and into the sunrise rowed the long boats carrying Wakia, beautiful creature of peace and laughter, whose curling brown hair trapped the red gold of sunlight, and whose strange level eyes held the sea's deepest mystery, changing like the water in light and shadow. So the fair god moved to the dawn toward the lands of the dawn star, sped onward by the chants of farewell sung by the sorrowing people. And since that day, though some have said that he is sometimes seen in spirit, yet in the flesh they are still waiting for him to come back to his beloved islands of Polynesia. Author's note: to Dr. Buck, who wrote Vikings of the Sunrise, beside, beside being himself a Polynesian, was a scholar of the past of his people. We owe the answers to the following questions, put to him in a personal letter. Do you know of a prophet or teacher who came among the Polynesian islands, teaching theology and agriculture? He dressed in a long white toga-like garment. His eyes were gray-green. His long light brown hair had reddish highlights, and he was bearded. If you recognize this figure, please tell me his name, his century, and the manner of his coming. From which direction did he arrive, and whence take his departure? That is, if your legends can answer these questions. An answer came both briefly and formally from the Bishop Museum, where he was the director. I recognize this figure from our legends. His name is Wakia. The other questions I cannot answer, much as they intrigue me. However, I am to go to an outlying island of the Tahitians, where two old women can still chant the ancestor legends. From them, and another in a different island, I hope to learn the answers. Therefore, in 2 or 3 months, you will hear from me again. In 3 months, as promised, came the second letter. Wakia the healer lived in the 1st century of the Christian era, or generally speaking, in the time of Jesus. It seems that he came in the early dawning of our history to these tribes who were fighting in this outlying island. I'm enclosing a copy of the story as it was told to me.